karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat krupatamaham vande paramanandam madhavam.
જય શ્રી કૃષ્ણ.
જય શ્રી કૃષ્ણ.
જય શ્રી કૃષ્ણ.
જાનાબેન આવ્યા છે? જાનાબેન છે?
જાનાબેન આવી ગયા.
જાનાબેન આવી ગઈ છે.
ઓકે, મારે છે ને એમને આપણે શરૂઆત કરીએ પહેલા જે એમની નોટ હતી ને એના ઉપર મારે કંઈક કહેવું છે. એમની એક નોટ હતી કે જેમાં કોણ આ બધું કરે છે કે પેલા આંખ છે તે આંખે કંઈક ફળ જોયું એનો એક્ઝામ્પલ, અને એને પછી છે તે હાથે જોયું એટલે હાથે પથરો માર્યો, પછી પગ એને ત્યાં લઈ ગયો અને પછી ફળ પડ્યું અને દંડો તો પીઠ પર પડ્યો. That was the kind of thing. આંખમાં આંસુ આવ્યા. Right. It was a very nice thinking, nice theme. અને એના ઉપર એક શ્લોક છે એ મારે કહેવો છે. Usually people do not know this thing. This is a little story that comes out from Dayanandji's book. કે અંતઃકરણ શુદ્ધિ માટે આ વસ્તુ કેવી રીતે જરૂરી છે. You see different things doing different things. તો વસ્તુ કરાવનાર કોણ છે? હવે એ પેલી નોટમાં હતું તો આપણે સમજી શકીએ કે આપણને ઈચ્છા થઈ એટલે આપણે ત્યાં ગયા અને પથરો માર્યો. તો ઈચ્છા વોઝ વન થિંગ, અને ઈચ્છા ક્યાં થઈ? મનમાં. સો મન વોઝ અનધર થિંગ. ઓકે, સો ધોઝ ટુ ફેક્ટર્સ, એના ઉપર આ એક મંત્ર છે. તો એકચ્યુઅલી મંત્ર ઈલા વુડ સે કે સંસ્કૃતમાં તું નહીં કરતો, એટલે આઈ વુડ લાઈક ટુ પ્રોબબ્લી ગીવ એ ટ્રાન્સલેશન in English. Okay, આ મંત્ર દયાનંદજીના જમાનામાં નાના છોકરાઓને 1000 વર્ષમાં એક વખત 1008 વખત ગાવાનો એક જ દિવસમાં. તો કે શેના માટે ગાવાનો? તો કે તમારી મનની શુદ્ધિ થાય. તો આ મંત્રનું ટ્રાન્સલેશન તમને આપું છું. કયો મંત્ર છે? Desire did it. Salutation, O Lord, to desire. Desire did it. Desire does. I do not do. Desire is the doer. I am not the doer. Desire causes the act. I do not cause the act. Anger did it. Salutation to anger. Anger did it. Anger is, I do not do it. Anger is the doer. So, આપણને એમ લાગે કે આમાં શું છે? What happens? Sometimes we do something અને પછી શું કહેવાનું? તારે કેવું છે? અચ્છા, તું મને કહેતી હતી. ઓકે. તો શું થાય છે કે આપણને કાઇન્ડ ઓફ મનમાં કંઈક વસવસો રહી જાય કે આ મેં ખોટું કર્યું. તો ઇટ રિમૂવ્સ ધીસ કાઇન્ડ ઓફ અ થિંગ. ઇટ રિમૂવ્સ ધી, શું કહેવાય કે સેલ્ફ કન્ડેમ્નેશન. એમનો વર્ડ છે સેલ્ફ કન્ડેમ્નેશન. આપણે એક જાતનું એક વ્યથા આપણામાં ઊભી કરીએ છીએ, એને વ્યથાને લઈને આપણે ખોટા દુઃખી થઈએ છીએ. આ અંતઃકરણની સુધી, ઇફ યુ કેન સેપરેટ યોર સેલ્ફ from all these things like anger, emotions, basically 2 emotions, anger and desire, then I think this is the mantra for that. So
જરા એમ પેલું ટ્રાન્સલેશન ને બધું જરા મોકલી આપજો, ઈમેલમાં મોકલી દેજો.
Yeah, okay, I will do that. Yeah, it's a so it's a કામો કરશિત નામો એવી જાતનો મંત્ર છે. Actually this appears in Mahanarayana Upanishad, which is not a very well-known thing.
Right.
એમની દયાનંદજીની એક બુક છે Values of the Value. Talking about Gita, but it appears into that kind of thing.
અચ્છા, મારી પાસે એ બુક છે, પણ બધાના માટે મૂકજો ને એટલે ખબર બધા વાંચે.
Yeah, I will probably try to copy it and send it to you.
અનિલભાઈ, સંસ્કૃતમાં કયો શ્લોક છે?
Yeah,
what is the Sanskrit શ્લોક?
કામો કરશતિ નામો કામો કરશતિ કામો કરોતિ નાહમ karoti kamam, karta naham, karta kamam.
Okay.
Manyur naham, manyur, so that's, yeah. So I will send that sloka.
Yeah.
But the point is that our traditions have lots of little wisdoms like this. And they they appear as a mantra, as a ritual, as a puja, as a jap and things like that. But it is for some kind of our evolution upwards, so that's the thing. Anyway, I thought I would just, the topic was there, so I thought I would just add this to you.
No, it's good to know. Yeah. Okay.
અનિલભાઈ, આજે તમે તમે જે કીધું દયાનંદ સરસ્વતી ને
ના ના એ દયાનંદે આપણા હર્ષા વિદ્યાવાળા ચિન્મય
ઓકે ઓકે યા ઓકે
એમની એ આઈ થિંક એક ફકરો વાંચવા જેવો છે. ઇફ આઈ ટ્રાય ટુ ગેટ ઇટ somehow in the image PDF, I will try to send it to you.
ના મને બહુ જ ગમ્યું ને હું હવે મારા ગ્રાન્ડ કિડ્સ ને પણ વાંચી સંભળાવીશ ને.
બરાબર.
Okay, now we can start with the main topic.
All right, તો ગયા વખત આપણે વાત કરી હતી કે ભાઈ what things we want to talk about. One of the thing was karma yoga, that most of the people responded saying that's what we want. Radhibhai had mentioned about Vaishnavite school and differentiation within the Vaishnavite school, etc. I think what we'll do is probably at the end of it, when we decide that we don't want to continue, we'll probably go over again after we have gone through most of this stuff and try to summarize the key aspects of Vaishnavite school and differentiation and similarities within that group. So at least we have a good understanding based on what we have talked about. I think that will be the best way.
જનાબેન.
Yeah, Janaben bolo.
તમે કર્મનું કહેતા હતા ને તો હું વાંચતી હતી ને તો એની અંદર એમ કે કર્મ યોગાની સાથે સાથે તમે જ્ઞાન યોગા પર થોડુંક સાથે લેતા જાઓ ને તો કદાચ, કારણ કે ઘણી વખત તમારામાં જ્ઞાન ન હોય પણ તમે કર્મ એ કર્યા કરો તો પણ એનું બરાબર ના કહેવાય ને, એટલે સાથે થોડુંક લિટલ બીટ બધાનો જો મત હોય તો. ઓકે,
All right, sounds
માટે
good.
નહીં.
Right. Second part of the question, maybe before we go forward, I wanted to give a historical update. So at least you have a good understanding of Karma Yoga concept. Gita has multiple chapters that deal with Karma Yoga. But the key aspect is that most of our acharyas did not emphasize Karma Yoga as the main part. Shankaracharya in 6th, 7th century, 8th century, talked about Jnana Yoga as the main aspect, essentially using Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga as a preparatory tool to reach the Jnana Yoga. Because at that time in history, our argument was against Buddhist schools. Buddhism and Jainism. Buddhism primarily, not Jainism. Jainism was a smaller section. So because Buddhism dealt with concept of no Atman and no God. So his argument was centered on Jnana Yoga. Now what happened is that he prevailed and essentially converted most of the India to Hinduism back, from Ashoka's time to Shankaracharya's time. And what happened over next many centuries, by 11th century, Bhakti schools started emerging. Ramanujacharya was the first one. Nimbarka was just about similar time. So they started emphasizing Bhakti aspect. So what they did is put Karma as the lowest part, Jnana as the second one, and Bhakti as the culmination. So Karma was always there in both the schools, but it was considered to be call it a preparatory tool, not equivalent to either Jnana or Bhakti, depending upon who you are talking to. So Bhakti schools basically dominated India from 11th century onwards until 15th, 16th century, when Vallabhacharya and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually created the glory of Vaishnavite schools, and Bhakti schools in general. So maybe until 19th century or so, India was more or less, or Hinduism in general, was more or less inclined towards Bhakti school as a dominant and arguing against Jnana school. But Karma Yoga concept was never ever the dominant concept anywhere in the history. And I think that changed by Vivekananda. In the initial half of his life, he emphasized Jnana Yoga as the ultimate pathway. But over the maybe later part, maybe 1895 onwards, he began to equate Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, and Raj Yoga as well, which was more a meditation kind of thing, as equivalent path, not necessarily one over the other. Call it Samuchayavad. Samuchayavad basically means that you choose any one of them and you will reach the ultimate. You don't, there is not necessarily stepwise phenomenon. Initially, he was talking in that respect. He was saying Bhakti, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga was the ultimate. But I think the influence of RMK, Ramakrishna Paramahansa, eventually changed him. Though obviously, by the time he talked about Jnana Yoga as a dominant school, RMK already had died. But over the time period, by 1895, 1896, somewhere in that time frame, he began to equate. Now, that is a controversial part. Let me give you background. During this time, he was in America and England. He was primarily in America, but he had gone to England a couple of times. And he met a lot of Western scholars too, Western theologians. So there was a German theologian who claimed is that Vivekananda's emphasis on Karma Yoga is a direct derivative of what he learned from Christianity. Because during this time, Christianity was sort of spreading all over India as well as Africa and other countries, where they were basically using Karma Yoga, action within the community, as a tool to convert the people to Christianity. So for them, Karma Yoga was a mechanism to entice the people, get them involved in the economic hierarchical structure, eventually gradually convert them to Christianity. So a German scholar argued basically that Vivekananda is using same kind of argument that Western theologians are using to say this is an indigenous to Hinduism per se. That this is not necessary. He was saying that this came from Christianity, but then people started arguing against it, said this was there in Hinduism as well. In Gita, it was there. It's just that it wasn't being emphasized enough. So that is how he changed. Now, during this time when he went back to India, later on, he went back to India around 1898 and then he come back to America one more time. But during this time, he began to talk about Karma Yoga concept in India. And he started talking about opening the schools, opening the hospitals and those kind of stuff. That we need to be involved in doing all those kind of things. So there was a lot of argument back and forth within RM Commission. There were some Swamis who were actually direct descendants of RMK who argued that this is not the part of work we need to do. We need to do the work of religion and spirituality, and this is not necessarily part of that. Vivekananda argued vociferously about it, and eventually prevailed, saying that our role is not necessarily only teaching Vedanta, but also getting involved in the community at large as a Karma Yoga concept. Now, that was the turning point where Karma Yoga began to be re-emphasized in the equal terms. And eventually, Mahatma Gandhi picked up the thing. He basically, Gandhiji in general, was not much interested in bhakti stuff because he had a deep distrust of our priests, our Hindu Shankaracharyas and all those guys. He believed that these guys are the guys who used the scriptures to dominate the society. How Brahmins came to dominate the society, he believed that. So he wasn't too keen about temples and those kind of stuff. He rarely ever visited temples. He didn't have a great deal of interest in theology of Jnana Yoga either, though he often mentioned about many of those things, but he didn't want to be directly involved in this Jnana Yoga concept either. For him, the one concept that was interesting to him was Karma Yoga. So he began to re-emphasize, reorient Hinduism towards Karma Yoga as ultimate. His argument was simple, directly coming from Isha Upanishad, and I have quoted that somewhere. It will come down. Basically, Isha Upanishad's first sentence is something like this, is that whole world is permeated by Lord, by God or Lord or Brahman or whoever, renounce and enjoy, covet no one's have wealth. That is the first stanza. So basically his idea was that the world is equal to God, which is also RMK's concept. This world is permeated by God. That means these people living in the world are essentially God. So renounce the personal desire and enjoy. And covet, no, don't long for the wealth of others. That is the first stanza. So this is a historical background. You know, how Karma Yoga began to be an important aspect of Hinduism in general, though it was there all the time. Yeah, go ahead. Ines bhai.
Well, okay, I'm not muted.
તમારો અવાજ બહુ ધીમો છે.
So basically, Vivekanand, one way of looking at it is Vivekanand was the savior of Hinduism in one sense, and that is that Christianity was beginning to take roots in India.
Right.
The Western world was forcing it from strength point of view as well as from financial point of view.
Sure.
And India was a country or a land where Hinduism was there, but you know, it could move one way or the other, and the Muslims were taking over from the political point of view. So that's where Vivekanand saw that whole geography there and said, you know, how can I save Hinduism and make it easier for an average person to follow it? If I call Karma Yoga as part of Hinduism because it was there many years ago and Krishna talked about it, that's maybe the only way to save Hinduism. Otherwise, Christianity would have taken over India.
I mean, there is a significant truth that Christianity did convert a lot of people in Asia and Africa, except India.
Right.
You know, even after 200 years of Christian domination over us, only less than 3% of India is Christian. You know, 2.5% or so right now is Christian. So rest of the African continent and some part of the Asia essentially became Christian dominated societies. So yes, it is true that obviously the stability of Hinduism in general, which withstood Muslim invasion for 700 years or so, and then couple of 100 years of Christianity. So there was already some degree of stability within the Hindu fold. But I think Vivekanand strengthened that aspect, no doubt about that.
Right, okay.
Yeah. And second part, I think I should mention, and since we talked about acharyas, see, think about this. Jnana Yoga concept was dominant concept in Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. But he did not openly revolt against Brahmin domination. So he essentially kept his eyes closed to subjugation of Shudras and, you know, Vaishyas and down the ladder. Bhakti schools recognized that part very well. Ramanujacharya was a game changer as far as I can see. You know, what he did was made, see, until that point, the scriptures of Hinduism were unknown or unknowable to lower caste. You know, especially Shudras were not allowed by coercion as well as opportunity not to study scriptures. So they were left in a limbo so that they will never ever be able to challenge the hierarchy of Hinduism. What Ramanujacharya did was bring the religion back to the lowest class and made them feel they are part of us. And he viewed that bhakti aspect is where things will get easier to understand. Understanding Jnana Yoga to an uneducated lower class people will be extremely hard to understand. So he and then several acharyas of Bhakti school essentially amplified that picture. You know, getting the lower classes within the Hindu fold feeling that they are part of us, or at least somewhat closer to us. I mean, us means Brahmins and upper caste. So their contribution goes, their important contribution to the society as well. So they essentially enlarge the scope of lower classes by making them feel welcome within the fold of Hinduism. And that's important aspect as well, not directly connected to Karma Yoga per se, but that's important part of the history, to understand.
Yeah, that expands the base of Hinduism.
Precisely the point. Or at least stabilized the hierarchical structure in a way that lower classes feel they are part of us in some way.
I mean, one of the things, maybe I'm totally wrong, but Keralites are mostly Christian because of the reason that we, whoever the we is, did not allow them or did not make Hinduism available to them. And that's why they became Christian.
Well, that is one of the aspects, yeah, sure. And Vasco da Gama, landed in the lower part of eastern coast of India. So that is the reason that they were able to sort of convert in the smaller section of East Coast.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually,
It came in Cochin, and if you look at right now, near Cochin, there are more churches, more those, and Christianity more prevalent in
Cochin.
Kerala.
Right, absolutely right.
actually, the entire coastal India is whatever percentage of Christians are there, they are in coastal India more prominent. All three sides.
Yeah, I mean, from Goa down south.
Goa down to,
Yeah.
right.
Right. Pratap, I cannot see you because I can only see 4. So
Yeah.
speak up if I don't see you. Yeah.
Okay, I will.
Yeah. Okay. So second part before we go forward with the slide is some that Naina Ben asked a question I wanted to sort of amplify. Karmano Siddhant, or theory of karma versus karma yoga. Now karma basically means action. What Sankaracharya said is that every action leads to a reaction, and which is true, like Newton's law. They are intertwined with each other. What Sankaracharya said was, because he did not believe in karma as the ultimate pathway, he said that every action leads to reaction, and every reaction leads to bondage to the world. So essentially it moves you away from the center, which is Atman. So action performed is a way to be tied to the bondage of samsara. That was his idea. So action leads to reaction, and reaction leads to bondage. And that bondage binds us. The story that we remember, the Sankaracharya story goes something like this, that he was caught by alligator. His foot was caught by alligator. Now this is just a made up story. I don't believe it's true. So the story goes something like this, that he is caught by the alligator, and then eventually he says to mom is there, that he will let me go only if you allow me to be sannyasi. So this is like a metaphor, call it that way. So what he says is that I'm caught up in the jaws of the samsara, and I can be only released if mom, let me become the monk. And then mom says, yes, I will let you go, but you must come back at the end of your life. So that is a metaphor he's using, basically. If you take an action, or action will lead you to bondage. So the way to deal with that is nivrutti from samsara. So his idea of jnana is directly connected to nivrutti, withdrawal from the activity in the world, which is pravrutti. So what Vivekananda said was something like this, is that pravrutti performed for common good, and Gandhi amplified that idea further. Pravrutti performed for common good is not necessarily binding, has no necessary binding effect. There is no bondage with that. And the niskama karma concept, which Gandhi embraced to a great deal, action, desireless action, niskama karma, What Gandhi said is something like this, that yes, karma may bind you to sansar, action, but niskama karma will release you from sansar. Because it is not done for your own personal gain. So that was the idea that began to get amplified. And I would say that Hinduism per se has dramatically changed because of that idea for 100 years. You know, until that point, service as a tool for salvation was not necessarily emphasized at all. Service for common good, like simple thing like what Hindu Charity for America does. You know, so service performed by Dinesh Bhai and Harish Bhai and all these people is essentially a tool for salvation. That idea began to be amplified with Vivekananda and further amplified by Gandhiji. So that's important part. And the important part, other important part I want to sort of emphasize again is this. What Bhakti school did was this, is yes, desire makes you go towards the world. But if you sublimate your desire to Godhead, you don't have to extinguish your desires. You have to channel the desire to God. So you continue to desire, but learn to sublimate that desire to Godhead and you will reach Godhead. Gnana Yoga concept was essentially a Gnan leads you to bondage. If you get enlightened to bondage, get enlightened to Atman, that Agnan will be removed and the light of Atman will shine on you. So the path is Gnana Yoga is remove the Agnan to the Atman. Pathway for Bhakti school is you may desire, but channel your desire to something else, which is Godhead. Raj Yoga, which is the fourth aspect, says because your mind is scattered all over. If you learn how to concentrate your mind on one individual entity, which is you yourself or Atman, you will reach the salvation. So the reason yoga, meditation is emphasizing is avoiding the scattered mind, because mind takes you everywhere in the world. If you can learn to concentrate on yourself, it will be the pathway of salvation. Karma Yoga, obviously we talked about. What Karma Yoga said is continue to do your action, but dedicate your action to a cause for common good. And that is the pathway to salvation. So that is how you can tie all those. So Vivekananda's famous statement is something like this: choose any of these four pathways, service, Raj Yoga, meditation, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, and all of them will lead you to salvation. So that is the idea behind Karma Yoga, essentially. All right. So, Anil Shalat, you want to add anything? અવાજ બંધ છે.
તમારો માઇક તમારું માઇક.
Yes. I want to add one thing, and that is બરોબર છે, Vivekananda, and they emphasized the Karma Yoga and all that thing, but Karma Yoga essentially was there even in the ancient time. I want to bring the concept of yagna, and in that, doing that, I want to bring Gita chapter 3. There you would have a definition of yagna. There are a couple of, I just made a little outline of what that chapter is, and I'm answering two questions. First question was Janaben's, that Jnana goes with the karma or not. So Gita answers this way. It is I think the third sloka in the chapter 3. It says basically that there are two traditions in this world. And the two traditions are, one tradition is the Jnana tradition, and other tradition is a karma tradition. Lokesmin vividha nishta. I have to bring little bit Sanskrit because I get more out of Sanskrit that I cannot get in any other language. When it says nishta, you could translate it as a kind of a, what was the worldview at that time? That's the word. So there are two worldviews. One is the worldview of the Jnanam, and the other one is a worldview of karma. Now the thing is that take any subject, any, physics, engineering, mathematics, whatever, we get insight by doing it. If we just have a scripture and nothing more than that, then we do not get the insight. But if we do something, we get the insight. So Jnana and karma somehow are sort of related to each other. That's what I think I would interpret in that particular shloka, that one leads to the other. It's not just the one could separately do one thing and you could do separately other thing. They are kind of sort of intertwined. So that's about the worldview. So our worldview also, when we do things, it leads us to a greater insight into worldly things maybe, but that can also lead to a spiritual thing. Now here, Gita talks only of the spiritual thing. So that's point number one. And then later on, there are several yajnas described into that. There's yajnas, if you look at it, they were not, you can think that they were done for their kingdom or king and all those things, but that also they distributed a lot of wealth to other people. So they were sort of generally done for a larger group of people. Even when I do things for my family with a particular point in mind, particular thing in mind, I'm going away from myself and actually expanding myself to a little bit further down. So that sort of idea of yajna in that sense, that distributing wealth to others, doing things for others, doing for the larger community was, I think, there. And of course, it got emphasized by Vivekananda. That is for sure. Yes.
So, I cannot see you either. So speak up if you have anything. Yeah. Go ahead. Asmita Ben.
Again, I got confused a little bit. Anil Bhaina mate. Pelo je second day માં નથી કર્મને right, તમે fruit આનો અપેક્ષા ના રાખો. તો what is the difference between insight and a fruit after કર્મની સાથે વાત કરે છે ને? What is the difference then?
The insight of doing things where you get insight, when you do not expect, you see, who gives you the fruit? That is the kind of idea that gives to you. So that again leads you to the God. This is the kind of a thing you just go on doing things, but then ultimately giver of everything is a God. If you take just that simple thing, it leads you to the spirituality. So that's why the desireless, Gandhiji's word for this thing was, I think, Rajendra, you can correct me, anasakti yoga.
Precisely.
So, asakti nahi rakhi. Asakti is that desire.
Desire.
So you have a goal for it. You look for the success in what you do. But then at that point, once you do it, just leave it to the God. Whether it is successful or not, that's not your business. That's what that took in chapter 2.
Yeah, and no desire. You do your karma, but no desire.
Yes, and that is what, if we have a chance, we will look at some of the Gita verses, go into that, and they would tell you the same thing, that you do things, and there are examples of Krishna himself doing these examples, giving that examples, that you just do things just as you do it, without your personal desire into it.
મારો ક્વેશ્ચન એ છે કે we should help suffering people કે છોડી દેવાના કે એણે ગયા ભાવમાં પાપ કર્યું છે એટલે આ ભાવમાં ભોગવે છે. What should we do?
Yeah, well, I mean,
કારણ કે મારે અનિલને ક્લાસ કાયમ થતો હોય છે એટલે કહું છું.
That is a part of downside of karma theory. Karma theory has a positive aspect, but most important negative aspect is this: justification and rationalization for people who are downtrodden, because they deserve what they did in their previous life. This is the result of their previous bad action. So that was being used by upper classes and Brahmins in general, is that you are suffering because of your previous karmas. So there is nothing anybody can do about that. So that was, but I think that we will talk about karma theory late some point in time. And this is one of the major downside of the karma theory.
Okay.
Yeah,
Asmita,
I think the reason for that downside is the wrong interpretation. That is Nainaben's question over here. That a karma no siddhant. If you take this karma no siddhant in a very mechanical way, there is an action and there is a reaction. Now that happens in the physical world, but in the spiritual world, that is very complex. Now I'm bringing Arvindo's thoughts into this one. And there is an evolutionary view, but I just wanted to bring that siddhant that you are talking about, that action and reaction kind of a thing. Somebody did this thing and that is why he's doing this thing, is a very mechanical view of things. And that if you modify that, then probably you could still live with the karma theory without having too much downside on it.
Smita and Janaben, both your questions can be the way I understand it. Why is chapter 2 where Krishna says karmanyevade karyaste ma phaleshu? Why? Because if you go back in the first chapter where Arjuna says, these are all my relatives, these are all my good friends, my gurus, I cannot kill them. This is where the moho part of the human nature comes in. And Bhagavan says, is your duty,